This episode of Powerhouse is brought to you today by Poly.
We really see housing and investing in communities as a nonpartisan issue, and we are able to share our story of impact with both sides of the aisle. We know that there are serious issues, and we're absolutely at the ready to help tackle them together.
Welcome to Powerhouse, where we interview the biggest names in housing and ask them about their strategy for growth. I'm Diego Sanchez, president of Housing Wire, and my guest today is Marietta Rodriguez, CEO of NeighborWorks America. Marietta, it's so great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So for those of us in the audience that aren't familiar, what is NeighborWorks America?
NeighborWorks America is a congressionally chartered public nonprofit. We were created by Congress in the 70s to help fight disinvestment in urban neighborhoods. And we do that we've grown and evolved since then. We serve our mission in a variety of ways. We have a network of locally based nonprofits that focus on housing and community development. We have organizations in every state, including the District of Columbia and serving on the island of Puerto Rico. And we provide grants to them for those organizations to operate. We also provide lending and construction capital for them to develop. We also provide training, capacity building, and technical assistance. We're also one of the largest trainers in the community development fields. We offer our training to non-network organizations and entities. And we do that in-person trainings, virtually. We're getting ready for a virtual training institute now in May. And then in August, we'll be in the Big Easy in New Orleans, where we'll offer over 100 courses in housing, community development, and organizational management. We're a pretty unique organization in that we have a statutory board made up of the heads of the bank regulating agencies. And we're very fortunate to receive support from Congress through a direct appropriation. And we do fundraise privately as well, but we leverage the money we get from Congress and infuse that into the network organizations that I spoke about.
So the national organization is really a public-private partnership, it sounds like, in terms of how the money comes in. Are those local chapters also public-private partnerships and, getting funding from the national organization, but also local companies and individuals?
They are. I think that's one of the huge strengths of the network is that we're able to bridge the gap between public-private, but not only through leveraging money, but leveraging skills and partnerships. One of the foundations for us was a model that was discovered in Pittsburgh in the 70s, where a nonprofit was formed because members of a neighborhood in Pittsburgh were frustrated. They couldn't receive bank financing to improve their homes, replace roofs or fix furnaces. And so the residents of that neighborhood brought business leaders together, mostly bankers, as well as government representatives from the local city and county. And they all sat around the kitchen table, literally, and solved their community problems together. And what emerged was a nonprofit that these banks invested in. They formed a revolving loan fund that the nonprofit managed. And that's how residents in that community began to improve their homes. That model, that public-private partnership, is the foundation of the NeighborWorks Network. Every organization, those 250 that I spoke about, have residents as well as business leaders and government leaders on the boards of directors of those nonprofits. That lead the direction of what that organization does in that community.
So it sounds like the organization, both the national parent organization and the local chapters, were really born out of community response to redlining issues.
That's exactly right. You got it right.
So I'm sure that mission has evolved for NeighborWorks over the past few decades since the founding. What do you view as the current organization's role in the U.S. housing market?
It's a great question. I would really like to say that NeighborWorks is one of the leading voices in the affordable housing industry. And we do that through a variety of ways. First, we definitely listen to the community. What are the community needs? And how can we equip and support that local organization to respond to those needs? And we have the power of this network. So chances are if a community is struggling or tackling a problem, someone else in the country has already tackled that problem. So one of the best things we do is we bring peers together to innovate and problem solve together, to learn from each other. And then we can infuse resources to help that innovation grow and replicate across the country. So, we do that. We also, can convene the private sector to sit alongside us and the nonprofits to hear what issues are really happening on the ground. We have that direct connect into communities and really raise those voices and those issues and problem solve together. And really rally all of the major voices in housing and community development together to attack the problem or the issue that may be facing the community.
So it sounds like the national organization which you run, your clientele is sort of the local organizations and also other community organizations that you're helping with financing and training. Let's dive down into the local organization. Primarily, who do they serve?
Our organizations serve primarily what would be considered that affordable market, workforce housing. The network owns and manages over 210,000 units of affordable rental in their portfolios. We also we're known for our homeownership work and through housing counseling, affordable mortgage lending. We have over 83 CDFIs, it's community development financial institutions in the market. The majority of the customers that our network sees are somewhere below between 80 and in high cost markets, they can go up to 120% of area median income. But the majority of the customers that we serve are customers from diverse racial backgrounds, falling somewhere between 75 and 120 of the area median income. That customer can be someone that's looking for an affordable rental unit, could be a customer that would like to become a homeowner and is daunted by the process. Could be someone who's struggling financially with their credit and debt load, and they want to come in and work with one of the housing counselors or their home purchase advisors to help them put them on the path of homeownership, help them manage their debt and their credit. Could be someone that's really looking for down payment assistance or some other resources. Our organizations really serve as a resource hub in communities. For example, during the pandemic, we had some organizations working at the nexus of health and housing, but regardless, our organizations knew where resources were. So even though, they're not first responders, people trust them because they've been in the community for a long time. And so they can give information and referrals out. So while the customer base of the network is in that sort of 80 to 120, organizations rarely turn people away, particularly if they're looking for just information or maybe they're looking to help a family member or a friend. Personal referrals are huge in this market.
I have to imagine that affordable housing supply is the major challenge for the folks that are served by local organizations in your network. How does the national organization and local organizations help as it relates to supply? You talked a little bit about being really a pretty big multifamily operator at this point, but how else do you help with that supply challenge?
It's a great question. some folks don't realize, but we're a home builder. Our network organizations are developers. In fact, we recently ranked number 78 on the Builders 100 list.
So that's crazy.
Isn't that
wow.
insane?
Yeah.
As a collective, we're in the top 100 builders. So there are thousands of units in our network, single family and multifamily pipelines. And so how we contribute is providing units that go online. But we know that there's more that's needed. We're not even close to meeting the demand in the United States right now, as you know. And I would say to that end, our network is sitting on a pipeline of more than probably 60,000 units, a mix of both single family and multifamily that are ready to go into the ground today, but for having the right kind of capital to get those construction, that development underway.
Is that an area where, we have a lot of mortgage lending executives in this audience? Is that an area where you can partner with depository institutions and independent mortgage banks to help facilitate some of those projects?
100%. We the network loves to partner with local lenders, not only to seek the right kind of investment to mix in that investment stack, but also in finding mortgage-ready customers. And very often, the customers that go through the network that are educated and prepared are default resistant. Back in 2008, we did this study that showed that customers that went through the NeighborWorks network were twice as those that did not go through the network were a third more likely to suffer an early delinquency in the first 2 years of origination. So we know that partnership is important, and we know that we can deliver default resistant buyers in addition to being a partner on the development side.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, reducing risk of a loan. I have to imagine that that lending institutions look pretty favorably on that.
We'd like to think so. I think every so often we have to work at re-educating our lender partners about the value of housing counseling, and our realtor partners, frankly. Oftentimes, realtors and mortgage originators see a nonprofit intervention as inefficient or taking time away, right? So if you're a realtor and you're working with a customer and they need down payment assistance or maybe some credit repair, they can make a referral, but it can sometimes, they have a perception that it slows down the deal. And it doesn't have to. Certainly if we start working with a customer early enough, it doesn't slow down the deal. But from a risk mitigation standpoint, 100%, it makes a lot of sense for borrowers to work with a local housing counselor. I would say not even particularly on the prep, but even after they get into the home. And your listeners know, once you buy a home, that's the beginning of the story, right? There are demands for maybe new furniture or expenses that homeowner never had before. And so having a linkage to someone local that can help you on a budget side and prepare when tax preparation time comes along, there's a lot of hand-holding and support that our organizations provide even post-purchase.
Where should folks in my audience go to maybe read some of the case studies that celebrate some of these partnerships, look at some of the stats behind reduced delinquency? Where should folks go to learn more?
I would encourage them to check out our website, www.neighborworks.org. You can look up organizations there. There's a lookup. There's also a research tab where you can look for some of these papers and case studies. We have regional offices throughout the country. So if you have a lender or an audience member that is interested in partnering in a particular part of the country, just reach out to us and we'll make that connect. We want to be a partner with the private sector.
Amazing. So I imagine in your organizations day to day, implementation of projects across the country, you are encountering NIMBY issues as it relates to building and rehabilitating homes. How do you tackle that challenge?
Yeah, that's a tough one for sure. I think because our organizations have such deep roots in the community, they're known actors. People know they're not new to the market. They're committed to the community. So I think that helps, right? They have some credibility and they have some trust that they when they're coming to put a development online. I think when our organizations are able, or even NeighborWorks are able to break down what affordable housing really is, at the end of the day, it's workforce housing. It's providing housing for first responders, for kindergarten teachers, for nurses and nurse techs. And so for retail workers, our grocery store workers. So when we start to break that down and really reveal the face of who benefits from affordable housing, you need all of those people in a community for a community to be strong and to thrive. And I think that takes a little bit of the mystery, or there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of, bias against affordable housing because of what it used to be in the 70s, sort of ugly buildings, no landscaping. One of the hallmarks of the NeighborWorks network, particularly on affordable rental, is resident services. We provide many of our organizations provide a wraparound or comprehensive services to those communities that could include childcare and computer labs for children and activities, healthcare services. So it really makes them be a part and embed them in that community. And so they're seen as a community asset as opposed to something that's bringing down home prices. And I think when we have the time and the opportunity to share that story, then that NIMBYism turns into yes in my backyard, because people want to have, people fill those roles in the community, but it takes some time. And I'm not saying that it happens automatically every single time, but it is something that our network does encounter. But I think for the most part is able to break through some of that, because they are that trusted organization that has been in the community for years.
So we discussed already that NeighborWorks was launched to address redlining challenges in urban areas. However, in doing my research for this episode, it seems like you've really pushed as an organization into addressing rural housing issues. Could you compare and contrast some of those issues, that an urban local organization may face versus some of the issues that one of your organizations in a more rural setting would address?
I really appreciate, Diego, the question about rural, because it is something we are very committed to, something we think is really important in this country. And, they face very similar problems or issues, challenges that urban communities face. The problem is at scale, right? It's just a very different scale. So it makes the rural affordable housing story a little bit more complicated because of the scale. So, it can be challenging because there's lower population, which means a little bit lower demand, and it changes the economies of scale equation for example, a private sector developer, and the amount of subsidy perhaps that's needed for rural development is a very different equation than that for an urban one. And so oftentimes the return on investment is more difficult to pencil out because of the higher costs. And then you have labor and sometimes lack of infrastructure that you take for granted in an urban setting. There may not be in a more rural setting. So all of that translates into just more investment that is needed. Sometimes in rural communities, you have older housing stock that needs deeper subsidy again for renovation because it's declined over the years and they've suffered from from lack of investment. We've really seen a dive in new construction in rural communities recently. And we're seeing declines in affordable rental units for sure in rural communities. So it's a scale issue, both on the amount of housing, but also in the amount of subsidy that's needed. Mm-hmm. And we're hearing from our network that rural communities can have appraisal gap challenges because there may not be, like properties, or there aren't as many sales. So it's difficult for that sometimes to underwrite those deals for that reason as well. So appraisal gaps can happen in urban markets too, but it's a little bit different in rural markets. So, and we see that the community development infrastructure in rural markets is sometimes lags what we see in more urban communities. But nevertheless, there are innovations happening in rural markets. We're working really closely with factory built and modular home developers that can bring really high quality homes on site. And they've really improved the quality of construction and really pushed on price. I think we have to see if the tariff issue is going to impact that. But there are innovations happening, and we're excited to see that.
Yeah, I really like the extension of that focus into rural communities because socioeconomic and affordability challenges related to housing aren't just urban issues. So that makes a lot of sense to me. All right. So last question is on the new administration in DC. That new administration features pretty prominently the Department of Governmental Efficiency, which is looking at cuts really across government efforts. Do you have concerns about funding cuts in this next budget?
I mean, we always have concerns about funding cuts, especially not only the funding cuts that NeighborWorks could experience, but funding cuts to programs that are really critical in communities, community development block grants, the home program, Section 8, cuts to the CDFI fund. I mean, there's a lot of programs out there that our organizations rely on to solve some of the challenges that communities are facing. So we always have that concern. I was very encouraged that the administration so early put out an executive order encouraging and wanting to solve the housing affordability crisis in this country. And we have really a deep history in working with the private sector and administrations, regardless of the politics of the administration, of really solving and working together, linking arms and solving the issue. And we look forward to doing that with this administration as well.
And as a congressionally chartered organization, I imagine you are also collaborating with both sides of the aisle in Congress to make sure funding priorities are heard and thought about.
100%. I think we really see housing and investing in communities as a nonpartisan issue, and we are able to share our story of impact with both sides of the aisle, and both sides of the aisle are very supportive of our work and the work going on in communities. We know that there are serious issues, and we're absolutely at the ready to help tackle them together.
Yeah. Addressing affordable housing is one of the few issues in this country that is like a 90% issue. Like everyone is concerned about the lack of affordable housing and would like for us as a society to be doing more things about affordable housing. So that has to be in your favor.
I hope so. I hope that the wind is on our back. We have to solve this issue because unless people, we saw during the pandemic, for example, that's a great example. When people were not suitably housed, it became a life and death issue, right?
Right.
And people were using their homes. They were working out of their homes. They were educating their children out of their homes. They were accessing telehealth out of their homes. And so when someone is not suitably housed, it impacts every other element in their lives. And so it's really a foundational issue, and it requires us all to collaborate, innovate together, and invest together for solutions.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I thought we had a really productive and interesting conversation. And I wish you success in the coming years.
Thank you, Diego. I really appreciate Housing Wire putting a spotlight on the affordable housing issue. I know you deal with a variety of issues on your show, but I'm so grateful that you're highlighting this because it's really important.